Alright, you guys, this episode of Paradigm Profiles is called Mongols vs. Hells Angels. The Mongols Motorcycle Club is one of the most dangerous, reputable, most feared motorcycle gangs in the world. The Mongols, also known as the Mongols Nation, is a one percenter motorcycle club formed in 1969 in Montebello, California. The club is headquartered in Southern California and identifies with being a one percenter. The Mongols' main presence lies in Southern California, but they also have chapters nationwide in 14 states and internationally in 11 countries. They have chapters in Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Florida, Idaho, Indiana, Missouri, Nevada, New York, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Texas, and Virginia. The term one percenter was a term coined by William Barry, a former president of the American Motorcyclists Association, AMA, that believed 99% of motorcyclists were law-abiding citizens, implying that the last 1% were outlaws. This ideal stuck and has been adopted by these one percenter motorcycle clubs all over the world. The club's insignia is a Genghis Khan-like figure wearing sunglasses riding a motorcycle. This alleged AMA comment, supposedly in reference to a riot that kicked off in Hollister in 1947, was adamantly denied by the AMA, claiming to have no memory of such a comment. My guess is probably due in part to the stigmas and political backdrop that's attached to it. Whatever the story is, others have claimed that it was a misquote that was taken out of context. Whether the original quote is true or not, the 1% patch is worn only by clubs immersed in criminality, and that's been a proven fact. Outlaw clubs began wearing the 1% patch after Hells Angels president Sonny Barger convened to a meeting of the leaders of various Hells Angels chapters and other California clubs in 1960, in which the various clubs parlayed over the mutual problem of police harassment. The clubs voted to ally under the patch. But the Mongols would then form 2 years later and would flourish into one of the biggest and most fiercest 1%er MCs in the world. Mongols members have a long-standing history in the illegal drugs trade, especially methamphetamine, money laundering, robbery, extortion, firearms violations, murder, assault, and just mass violence. Former club president David Santillan denies that the club as a whole is a criminal enterprise, as he is expected to. What sense would it make for an MC president to openly admit that his club is an active criminal enterprise? But law enforcement officers who are familiar with the Mongols and the expansion of his club have claimed that the club has grown into an international enterprise that in some ways resembles the mafia. The Mongols MC operates mainly in the United States, and the motorcycle club's members ride Harley-Davidson motorcycles. In fact, it's a mandatory requirement for all Mongols club members to own and ride a legitimate Harley-Davidson motorcycle. The Mongols Motorcycle Club is an intricate criminal organization, an organization that took a page out of the Italian Mafia's playbook when it comes to its internal structure. A lot of criminal organizations haven't been able to accomplish this. I'm not just talking about MCs either, I'm talking about criminal organizations as a whole. When it comes to becoming self-solving and self-sustaining, this is where a lot of these criminal organizations fail and eventually become defunct. But the Mongols have established successful legitimate businesses that they own to go with their less than savory illegal operations. They own clubs, they sell merch, they have bylaws, and they even have regular meetings similar to other legitimate organizations. They also often participate in some charity work around the community. Some believe that this is done solely for the purpose of projecting a positive image and the political effect it exhibits, but either way, it's still something they do. In 1998, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, agent William Queen infiltrated the club, eventually becoming a full patch member and rising to the rank of chapter vice president using the undercover alias of Billy St. John. In April 2000, based on evidence gathered during Queen's 28-month undercover time with the club, 54 Mongols were arrested. All but one of the accused were later convicted of crimes including drug trafficking, motorcycle theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. On October 28, 2014 in San Gabriel, California, Mongols member David Martinez allegedly shot and killed Pomona Police SWAT team member Sean Diamond. Diamond was shot in the back of the base of his neck with a shotgun during the service of a search warrant. Martinez shot Diamond after the officer turned away from the door following the breaching procedure. Officer Diamond died at dawn, October 29, 2014, at Huntington Memorial Hospital. Judge M. Villar, at the preliminary hearing, added a special allegation to the capital murder charges after the prosecution connected him to a Mongols chapter in Montebello, California. His initial trial, which started in 2019, was deemed a mistrial after he was found not guilty of first-degree murder. A hung jury concurred with all other charges. Martinez faced the death penalty if convicted. The Mongols Motorcycle Club has built a reputation for money laundering, trafficking weapons, and just straight up mass violence. But again, this is a criminal organization, and with so much competition flaring up out of the MC world, this isn't even a fraction of the criminal activity that it's amassed since its inception. And in the MC culture, they basically operate under some of the same ideology and philosophy as street and prison gangs. Respect, credibility, and your name is predicated on things like violence, brutality, assaults, killings, mayhem, and other forms of criminal activity. Now, little needs to be said about the Hells Angels. This group is a well-established worldwide outlaw motorcycle club whose members also typically ride Harley-Davidson motorcycles. In the United States and Canada, the Hells Angels are incorporated as the Hells Angels Motorcycle Corporation. They've literally been able to take it to another level, a level where they're actually considered to be corporate. I can tell you for a fact that there's a lot of criminal organizations who try to emulate the HA model because of how established and how successful they've become. The NF is one I can personally attest to myself. The thing about the Hells Angels that makes them unique is not just the fact that they were one of the first criminal organizations that were able to do it and prosper, but they were also able to metastasize, expand, grow, and establish itself in a number of different ways. Because they were involved in criminal activity, they invested in their own bail bonds, they retained criminal lawyers, and they required members to pay commission, which was a common way other groups started using to become self-solvent and self-sustaining. Common nicknames for the club are HA, Red and White, HAMC, and 81. With a membership between 3,000 and 3,600 and 467 chapters in 59 countries, the HAMC is one of the largest motorcycle clubs in the world. The Hells Angels originated on March 17, 1948 in Fontana, California, when several small motorcycle clubs agreed to merge. Otto Freely, a World War II veteran, is credited with starting the club after breaking from the Pissed Off Bastards Motorcycle Club over a feud with a rival gang. The club's first official charter was reportedly drawn up in Fontana in 1950. Various autonomous Hells Angels chapters were formed throughout California in the decade following the club's foundation by nomadic members who moved from one city to another. The San Francisco Frisco chapter was reportedly formed by former members of the Market Street Commandos in 1954. The North Sacramento chapter was established in 1956, followed by another chapter in Sacramento the following year, which was formed by two brothers, James Mother Miles and Pat Miles, who were former members of the Hell Bent Glory for Biker Club. The Sacramento charter later disbanded and relocated to Richmond as a Nomads chapter in 1965. According to Ralph Sonny Barger, founder of the Oakland charter in 1957, other early charters of the club were founded in Gardena and elsewhere, with the members usually unaware that there were other clubs. The Hells Angels have a system of patches similar to military medals. The specific meaning of each patch is not publicly known, but the patches identify each biker's specific or significant actions or beliefs. For example, spilling the blood of an enemy has its own patch. Killing an enemy has its own patch. Showing acts of honor and integrity has its own patch, etc., etc. Different acts or individual achievements are rewarded with patches. The official colors of the Hells Angels are red lettering displayed on a white background, hence the club's nickname, the Red and White. The patches are worn on leather or denim jackets and vests. Red and white are also used to display the number 81 on many patches, as in Support 81, Route 81. The 8 and the 1 stand for the respective positions in the alphabet of H and A. Friends and supporters of the club use these in deference to club rules which purport to restrict the wearing of Hells Angels imagery to club members. To become a Hells Angels prospect, candidates must have a valid driver's license, a motorcycle over 750 cc's, and the right combination of personal qualities. It is said the club excludes child molesters and people who have applied to become police or prison officers. Intravenous drug use is also forbidden among club members. So as it shouldn't really come as any real surprise, money, financial gains, or capital is one of the primary reasons why the conflict developed between the Mongols and the Hells Angels. Money, territory, and power. And whether or not it's in that order depends on what you believe or who you ask. As the Mongols began their expansion and started to grow by opening up new chapters, their dependence to maintain a self-sustaining criminal organization required them to also expand some of their money-making ventures, i.e. selling merch, drug and gun distribution, and other forms of criminal activity. As their club grew, they began to move in and infringe on the HA's territory. At least that's what the Hells Angels believe. They began selling more merch, more drugs, and whatever else they needed to do in order to make money. And needless to say, the HAs didn't like this. Since its inception, the HAs have always tried to control and manage the MCs across the nation. Everything from what color you can wear, who can wear bottom rockers, what you can represent on bottom rockers, who's allowed to form new MCs, and some of the idiosyncrasies, customs, and traditions that MCs live and die by. The Hells Angels basically think that they can control the rights of anyone and everyone who decides to jump on a Harley with two wheels and go for a ride. You could be a non-club member that's not affiliated with any MC at all. However, if you're just a regular guy out riding and you have unknowingly violated something like wearing a vest with the wrong colors on it or some other infatuation that conflicts with their beliefs, they'll push up on you, almost to the point of becoming bullies. In fact, within the MC world, that's exactly how they've been referred to, as bullies. And when you're someone who's not affiliated with a club, or you have a small group of friends who have ambitions to start your own club, you're no match to go up against a club like the Hells Angels if they press up on you. This is the reason why they've been able to maintain control over the MC world. You're either told you're not allowed to start a club, or if you do, you then have to pay monthly dues and you fall under the umbrella of the HAs. There have been a lot of MCs over the years that have tried to take a stand against the Hells Angels and fight for their right to exist. But most of these clubs were smashed and couldn't fight against a club as strong and as fierce as the HAs. But the Mongols, aka the Mongols Nation, are a different kind of animal, and they are an MC that has not only become one of the HA's biggest enemies, but they've also become one of their biggest threats. Aside from the Mongols' expansion and their growth becoming a threat to the HAs, it has also been said that the initial conflict between the Mongols and the HAs escalated over a former HA who allegedly turned state's evidence against his former club. The HA who snitched and ultimately defected would then commit a cardinal sin by crossing over and disgracefully joining the Mongols. This was the ultimate form of betrayal, an unforgivable offense that was compounded even more behind a club member's old lady or wife who would later leave a fellow HA member for a Mongol. The former HA member, Chester Green, who allegedly snitched in a 187 case, was a former member of the HA's Oakland chapter. After Chester flipped out of the HAs and flipped into the Mongols, Chester's brother, Bud Green, hooked up with one of the HA's old ladies and continued to flaunt the relationship by rubbing it in their faces. Every chance he got, he took her out to places where he knew the HAs would see his purposeful acts of PDA, public display of affection. Whether or not this was the defining incident that started the conflict, it definitely contributed to the tension between the two clubs. One of the first incidents between the Mongol Nation and the Red and White took place in the spring of 1977 at a local swap meet in Anaheim, California. The Mongols were out in big numbers on that day, when close to 40 to 100 Mongols clashed with about 10 HAs. Chester, the former HA who joined the Mongols, was there that day and had been floating rumors that the HA were vulnerable and were losing its sway. The 8 to 10 HAs that were there that day soon realized that a bad situation had turned a lot worse when they walked into a sea of Mongols. Chester was right in the middle of the Mongols when he locked eyes with several of his former HA club members. As the two clubs began to converge on each other, it was surprisingly an HA who swung first and kicked off the brawl. Accounts from onlookers claim that the fight was vicious, but that it stopped as fast as it started. Supposedly, an HA by the name of Jesse grabbed a handful of heavy iron sprockets and used these sharpened machine-edged motorcycle gears as a weapon against the Mongols. According to the story, he swung these gears for all he was worth, hitting and severely injuring several Mongols before the Mongols retreated. Over the next few months, the Mongols continued to test the HAs. Their new leader, Ray, a heavy meth user with a greasy ponytail and aspirations in the porn industry, not only didn't know how to lead, he was a terrible negotiator. A few months after the fight, the Mongols decided they were ready to push the envelope even further. The Mongols' president let it be known that they were going to be defying the HA's policy prohibiting other MCs from wearing a bottom California state rocker. The HA prohibited other MCs from wearing this bottom California state rocker, as this was the patch they wore to show their preeminence in the state. The outlaw world is all about respect and territory, but this was clearly a challenge that would have to be addressed. After a long, hot, quiet summer, on Labor Day weekend of 1977, the Hells Angels broke their silence. A pack of Mongols displaying their bold new California rockers rode along one of Southern California's winding freeways. In a hail of machine gun fire, they got their response. 2 people were killed and the murders got everybody's attention. If the Mongols mistook Ray's poor leadership as a sign that the club wasn't serious, they now knew otherwise. Local and federal law enforcement took notice as well. Those weren't the kind of headlines police chiefs and federal agents like to read. The killings got big play in the news. The public and every biker in the country were aware of them. Those in the know expected Mongol retaliation, but the Hells Angels were just getting started. 2 days later, the bodies of Redbeard and Jingles, the 2 Mongols they killed during the Labor Day shooting, were on view at the Lemon Grove mortuary. A member of the San Diego chapter, whose identity remains a point of debate to this day, drove up in a white Rambler and parked next to the building. He walked in and dropped a bouquet of red and white carnations on Jingles' casket. The Hells Angels' colors would have been obvious to anyone in the room. I'm guessing that the Mongols either thought it was a peace gesture or were too stunned at the ballsy move to react. The guy simply walked away untouched and unidentified. A couple minutes later, he remotely detonated a bomb concealed in the Rambler. He had parked the car in the wrong place, otherwise the damage would have been much worse. Still, the explosion injured 3 people. Back in the 70s and 80s, bombs were a favorite weapon among outlaw bikers. It was easy to get your hands on explosives. It didn't take a genius to wire a crude bomb, and they created real damage and fear. Outlaw clubs also had plenty of military veterans among their members, guys with lots of experience wiring explosives. But some of the Hells Angels started speaking out about these types of bombings. They felt like it was bringing the wrong kind of attention to the club, and they were worried about collateral damage, civilians getting killed in the process. Still, the club decided to keep the pressure on. War was war, and collateral damage was to be expected. Just 3 weeks after the Mongols' memorial, Thomas Heath, a 20-something short, stubby career criminal and Hells Angel prospect, walked a flat motorcycle tire into the frame-up. Brett Eaton, one of the club's military veterans, had rigged a bomb inside the tire so that it would detonate when the tire valve was unscrewed. After an hour, Heath called the shop and asked if the tire was done. Heath pressed for the tire to be fixed so that he could get his bike before nightfall. Jimenez finally told him he would get it done. Jimenez wasn't alone. Raymond Hernandez, the 15-year-old brother of another Mongol, was hanging out in the shop. A 15-year-old kid hasn't even started shaving yet. He was hanging out with this guy he must have looked up to. He was changing oil or helping out the best he could, learning, thinking about how soon he would have his own bike. This kid knew exactly what type of Harley he was going to have. Maybe a beat-up bobber he could trick out right there. Like every other teenage boy with a biker brother or father, he knew exactly how his bike was going to look and how cool he was going to look riding it. But he never got a chance to build or ride a motorcycle. He would never even own a driver's license. Henry Jimenez held the tire steady and began unscrewing the valve. The bomb contacts came together, and Mongol and teenager were instantly killed in a blast that blew the windows out of the buildings on either side of the shop. Days later, the president of the San Fernando Valley Mongol Charter, Luis Gutierrez, went out to his driveway to get in his van. It blew up as he opened the door. He was luckier than the 15-year-old. He escaped with his life and his body intact. The violence drew even more attention. Law enforcement doesn't care when bikers kill bikers or gang members kill gang members, but they don't like innocent kids getting blown up. From that point on, you couldn't wear your colors on a paved road in Southern California without getting pulled over and jacked up. Over the years, Mongol Nation and the Hells Angels would get into a lot of other skirmishes. Most were small and only involved a body or two, but in 2002, the two clubs would make history at the Harrah's Casino in Laughlin, Nevada. This incident was dubbed the River Run Riot. The River Run Riot was a violent confrontation between the Hells Angels and the Mongols motorcycle clubs that occurred on April 27, 2002 in Laughlin, Nevada during the Laughlin River Run. The conflict began when members of the Hells Angels went to Harrah's Laughlin to confront members of the Mongols because a police officer told members of the Hells Angels that their club brothers were being surrounded by Mongols, not knowing it was peaceful. Members of the Hells Angels went to confront the Mongols because they were misled to believe their club brothers were in trouble by the police officer. Mongol Anthony Barrera was stabbed to death, and two Hells Angels, Jeremy Bell and Robert Tumulty, were shot to death. This was the first time that there were multiple murders in the Nevada casino. The April 2002 brawl erupted at Harrah's Laughlin Hotel Casino during the annual Laughlin River Run rally. Hells Angels and Mongols club members fought each other with guns, knives, and wrenches. Two Hells Angels and one Mongols member were killed, and at least 12 other people were injured. Another Hells Angels member was shot to death on Interstate 40 in California, about 115 miles west of Laughlin. Later on, it was found out that the Mongols caught the HA slipping by himself and ambushed him right there on the freeway. After the incident in Laughlin, federal agents struck the Hells Angels headquarters and clubhouses in 5 states as part of a 2-year undercover investigation. This led to even more arrests as the ATF found military-grade explosives identified as military property through lot numbers. 7 Hells Angels and 6 Mongols were imprisoned as a result of the Laughlin event, and 36 other people had their charges dismissed. Frederick Donahue, one of the Hells Angels indicted after the incident, evaded capture for 6 years before surrendering in July of 2008. You would think that after close to 30 years of fighting that these two clubs would have found a way to set their differences aside so that they could get back to the business of making money for their clubs. But that hasn't happened. There would be 2 other notable events that took place with the Hells Angels, and the tension still hasn't subsided. But the Mongols weren't the only MC that was having issues with the HAs. Another well-established MC decided it was time for them to test the HA's footing as well. Ranked by law enforcement as the most severe clash of 2 California-based biker groups in nearly a decade, the spate of violence turned deadly when it spilled into Nevada with the brawl and shooting among members of the Hells Angels and the Vagos motorcycle clubs. The Vagos, also known as the Green Nation, is another 1%er MC that was presenting itself as a growing threat to the HA. The president of the Hells Angels San Jose, California chapter, Jeffrey Jethro Pettigrew, was shot to death, and 1 Vagos member was wounded in the melee at John Esquaga's Nugget Hotel and Casino in Sparks. A second Vagos member was wounded in a drive-by shooting the next day at the site of a nearby motorcycle rally in town. The Pettigrew killing, coming 11 months after a gunfight between the 2 gangs in Arizona that left 5 people wounded, in turn sparked tensions within the Hells Angels' ranks that led to yet another slaying in California. The latest casualty of the Hells Angels' recent battle against Vagos actually was inflicted by one of their own. At Pettigrew's funeral in California weeks after he was slain in Nevada, his close friend and sergeant-at-arms of the San Jose chapter, Stephen Tossin, was shot and killed by a fellow Hells Angels in an apparent quarrel among club members. People in the know claim that Tossin and others confronted the accused gunman, Stephen Ruiz, over his perceived failure to have protected Pettigrew during the Nugget Casino brawl, prompting Ruiz to pull a gun on Tossin. A group of bikers then pounced on Ruiz as thousands of mourners streamed out of the cemetery, preventing police officers at the funeral from making an arrest. In the end, it was unclear whether the bikers who descended on Ruiz did so to subdue him, beat him up, or help him escape, but witnesses said he was snatched up and taken away in a car. Suspecting that Ruiz may have been killed at the scene and his body dumped in the Pettigrew's grave, police later obtained a search warrant to dig up the burial site, but they found no trace of Ruiz. Later on, they found out Ruiz was alive and hiding out in Stockton. After he was arrested, he was transferred to Santa Clara County, where he eventually pled out to 3 years, 8 months under a plea agreement for voluntary manslaughter. One of the last major incidents that took place with the HAs happened outside of a Starbucks in Santa Cruz, California. As the Vagos' confidence in their club continued to grow, they challenged the HAs yet again. Imagine that, people are just trying to wake up and get some caffeine in their blood, when all of a sudden, these guys start going at it with ball-peen hammers, bottles, wrenches, knives, and whatever else they could use. The cold part about this conflict is that it all came down to territory. Who would retain the rights to hang out at that particular Starbucks? The Vagos brazenly came in and tried to cement their presence. It was a pretty strong play on their part to establish themselves as the premier club. Only in Santa Cruz would you have biker wars over who's going to control pumpkin spice lattes. But 7 months after the Starbucks ambush, violence between the two groups flared again in a gunfight in August of 2010 that left 5 people wounded and led to 27 arrests in the northern Arizona town of Chino Valley. In this incident, the HAs and Mongols apparently confronted each other and started firing along Yuma Drive in the community. The rival clubs used Chino Valley houses as their safe houses that are only blocks away from each other. Although nobody was killed in this confrontation, at least 27 people were booked on charges ranging from attempted murder, aggravated assault, to participation in a criminal street gang. Onlookers claim that the two clubs fired at least 50 rounds at each other in the small community of Chino Valley, north of Prescott. To this day, the HAs, the Mongol Nation, and the Green Nation remain mortal enemies, and there doesn't look like the bloodshed is going to end anytime soon. These clubs are fighting for dominance in the MC world, power, money, territory, and bad blood that is a result of multiple decades of fighting. I'm sure there will be more killings between these 3 clubs, and that it'll just get worse before it gets better. Even though I ride a Harley Davidson myself, I've never been a part of an MC, and I don't intend to. The politics are a little different from prison politics and what I was used to, but there is a lot of parallels. Violence is the moving force, respect is always demanded, and the members are required to pay commission. As time goes on and these clubs continue to prospect out a lot of gang members from the hood, they are gradually becoming more and more like the street gangs themselves. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. As we've been saying, we have a lot of good profiles that we're continuing to work on. Profiles that we kind of got backed up on. And although I want to get some of these out to you guys ASAP, I want to work on another spill about the Mongols versus the Mexican Mafia. Again, I want to apologize for the mix-up on the last profile that we did on the Mongols versus the Hells Angels. There were 3 profiles that got blended together. Part of it was due to software we were using, and part of it was user error. Anyways, we've been busy working on content, and for those of you who are asking about videos, bear with us, they're coming. With that said, we hope you are all enjoying the new year. We appreciate all the continued support, and as we always say, we appreciate you, the viewers, as we understand that without you, we would cease to exist.